on back to shade my smile.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be. For all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth, welcome to a brand new season of Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Brian Willett, coming to you live from the deep woods of Western Georgia on this September 20th, 2022. Tonight, we start off our first episode of the season with Michael and Marti Parry as we explore the afterlife and their work as mediums. There might be a message out there for us, or maybe even one for one of you out there in the audience. We never know what's going to happen on these shows. So stay tuned for the next 3 hours. We're taking your questions, your comments, your insights, and the discussion unfolds as we explore the afterlife tonight on Vestiges After Dark. Don't go anywhere. Hello, everyone. I hope you are all having a wonderful evening and are ready to join us tonight on this wonderful adventure as we explore, the intricacies of the afterlife through the lens of the incredible work of Michael and Marti Parry. It's always such a blessing to have them on the show, and we are going to be getting to that very shortly. Don't you worry. We're not going to waste too much time on the questions from the ether, because really we want to get into this and we really want to get into the subject tonight. But I do like to start off the season, getting into the questions that come in. And there's been a lot of questions coming in.
This is a good one too.
It really is. It actually really is. And it's one that I think it's important to discuss. So we're going to take a quick moment here to do questions from the ether, and then we've got the rest of the show to explore the afterlife. So the question came in from the Nicoland Network from Brandon. He asked some really good questions, so we tend to use his questions a lot.
Sure does.
And he's also not afraid to ask questions, so that's also a good thing. But his question this week was, where in the Bible does it say a woman cannot have any authority, or does it even say that? And then he goes on to explain that he got into a debate at his job regarding this. The guy was a diehard Republican, and he basically said that that any female running for president he wouldn't vote for because the Bible says women are not allowed to be in positions of authority.
The men are doing so well.
Isn't that the truth, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, the reality is I don't think, when it comes to politicians, no one really does a very good job, which is why I'm a libertarian. I kind of stay away from politicians. I prefer, I'm not an anarchist. Don't get me wrong. I'm not an anarchist, but I honestly believe in personal responsibility. And I think politicians just make things more complicated than they need to be. So, I don't need them. But anyway, it's a good question, and it's one that I think deserves an answer. And I wanted to give one that's a little bit more complete than the one I gave on the Nicoland Network. But I don't want to take too much time tonight on this. So I'm just going to be somewhat briefer than I probably should be, but enough to answer the question. So essentially, this is coming from two primary verses in the New Testament. One is 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 34. And the other one is 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 11. Okay, and I'll read them very quickly. They're short verses. 1 Corinthians 14:34 says, women should remain silent in churches. They are not allowed to speak, but must be in submission as the law says. And then 1 Timothy 2:11 says, a woman should learn in quietness and full submission. And then in the next verse 12, it says, I do not permit a woman to teach or to assume authority over a man. She must be quiet. Of course, both of these come from Paul. And this has led to 2,000 years of misunderstanding and I think a lot of bad blood in the modern era where, this kind of thing has fallen out of vogue in the sense that we no longer live in the ancient Jewish world, which was a very different world than the one that we live in today. But I really want to comment on this. So basically he's asking, where in the Bible does it say a woman cannot have any authority? Well, there's where it says it. But is that what it means? And the reality is it's not quite what it means or as it appears to be. And this is the reason why you cannot take Scripture out of context. It is also why, most importantly, you cannot take the intent of the author out of context, which the church has done when it comes to Paul's letters. Okay, because Paul did not write these epistles with the intention that they would become church doctrine and basically canon law for 2,000 years of Christian history. He wrote them as somewhere between formal and casual letters out there to explain the problems or help to resolve the problems that he was seeing in the various churches that he was there to guide. To take that stuff, that content, and bring it into the modern era is a bit irresponsible, but that's exactly what we've done. Now, that's not to say that there isn't information there, theological information that's very important. But when it comes to things like this, that's when you see the problem. So let's look at this for a moment and try to understand what really is actually being said. In 1 Corinthians, where he says women should remain silent in churches, they are not allowed to speak, but must be in submission. You have to look at the Greek, okay? And I'm not a Greek scholar, but I do reflect back on the Greek. And one thing that I think a lot of English speakers do not understand is that just like the word love has many different words in Greek, and there's different types of love. Well, speaking had different words. There was different, speaking in the sense to be made silent had different words. Okay, so if you were writing to say that somebody must remain silent out of obligation, or if you were saying that someone needed to be silent out of some solemnity, there are words for that. Paul doesn't use those words. He uses a Greek word. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this correctly. Like I said, I'm not a Greek scholar. Lalin is, I believe, how you say it. And what that literally means is to speak, usually in a casual sense. So one could extrapolate, being that Paul was a bit of a hothead.
A bit.
Quite a bit. Kind of like myself in a lot of ways. I can relate to Paul. One could extrapolate from this is that this particular church that he was writing to had a bunch of chattery women in during the services, and he was fed up. And he basically said, you need to be silent. And if you have questions, go ask your husbands. And we then took this and converted it into a doctrine that eventually led to, I think, it's part of the theology that has led to why there's no female priesthood and no female episcopacy, and at least in Catholicism and Orthodoxy. And this is part of, I think, not the whole thing. There's a lot more to it than that, of course. The choosing of the apostles being all men, and we don't have time to get into all that tonight. But I think it's important to note here that because of the Greek word that Paul uses, it's very likely that he's talking about a very specific instance in a very specific moment without any intention that this would become doctrine 2,000 years later. So that's the first thing to take into mind. And the other thing is to look at all the other instances where women were absolutely encouraged to speak, particularly when it came to the gifts of the Holy Spirit, where we're all equal. Absolutely. And the church is always seen as equals in terms of our relationship to God and our role in promoting the gospel. So when you start saying things like the church is misogynistic and the church is against women, it's very inaccurate, particularly when you are accusing that same church, the very church that has elevated...
Yeah, it's quite the opposite.
Quite the opposite. Elevated a woman to a status that no man has ever attained to and will never attain to, and that is the Theotokos and ever Virgin Mary. There is a particular category of the veneration that she is due in theology called hyperdulia. There's no one else that applies to. The greatest of all the saints is a woman. And then you could get into the history and the Gospels. Who was the first woman to proclaim the good news of the resurrection? And what is ultimately the gospel means good news. And what is the greatest news of the gospel? Well, the greatest news of the gospel is the fact that the resurrection has occurred, because that's something we all participate in. And who was it that proclaimed to men, no less, the first gospel? It was Mary Magdalene, another woman. Okay, who did Jesus choose to appear to first? Women. Okay, so to claim the church is misogynistic is a complete misunderstanding of the history and the historical context, and is probably proliferated by bad, pastors that don't know what they're talking about. When it comes to 1 Timothy 2:12, where he says, I do not permit a woman to teach or to assume authority over a man, she must be quiet. We have to also remember here that he's talking in terms of ancient Jewish law. In many cases, it was not even legal for women to assume authority over a man. And this is coming out of a history that is 2,000 years old, a culture that is 2,000 years old, that does not exist anymore. These are not supposed to be immutable laws that are carried into the modern era. Okay, these are things that are relevant to the time. He's writing to people in his time, his contemporaries. And this is the problem of taking these letters and turning them into doctrine, because they weren't written with that intent. Not that there's not doctrine in there. A lot can be learned from it. But when you create immutable law out of this, you run into these problems. So no, the church is not misogynistic. No, the church does not teach that women should be submissive to men, although there are pastors that do that because they take these verses literally. You're not supposed to be taking these verses literally. That's not what they're there for, and that's a big problem in Christianity. So I hope that answers the question. There's a lot more that can be said about that, but I don't want to spend too much time on that tonight because we have such a great show for you. And this is the first episode of the season, we have liturgical libations, a little other segment. And tonight's drink of choice is Ronzacapa XO. It is a very nice rum. So that's what we're drinking tonight. And what do you think of it tonight, Amy?
It's outstanding.
It's outstanding, isn't it? It's like it's got all the flavor of a rich, caramelized, almost like brown sugar. But you can tell there's age. There's a softness. It doesn't burn going down. Very, very smooth. I highly recommend it.
Definitely caramel.
Yeah, caramel is the primary flavor. And I drink a lot of rum in the summer. This is actually left over from my summer vacation. I thought it'd be good tonight because it's just, I don't know, it's a nice one when you're...
A little bit of fruit.
There is a little bit of fruit, the banana, tropical fruit.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
It is good stuff. Okay, enough of that. Let's get into.
Oh wait, we got a show to do.
We have a show here to do, and I don't want to waste any more time here. So, joining us from California is Marti and Michael Parry. How are you guys doing tonight? I'm so happy that you're with us.
Good to see you all again.
Hi guys.
Hey.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Y'all
It's
looking
great to be
good.
on the show again. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's become a bit of a tradition, Michael. We don't plan it this way, but it sort of happened that you sort of lead us into the new seasons. And I think you were definitely on the first episode last season. I think it was the one before that too. So it's fantastic. I think it needs to be tradition now. So when we start a new season, you guys have to be the first guest. How about that?
Tradition.
It is.
Oh wait, I'm supposed to be quiet, aren't I?
Not in this room. You're fine.
St. Paul's not here, and we're not going to tell him. It's fine. We also have from Australia, Father Chris Yates. How are you doing, Father?
Hey, Father.
Yeah, I'm pretty good. It's good to be back.
Yeah, you weren't with us over the summer special, but we're glad that you're here.
I'm so sorry. I was schlepping back to the far south of the state and back because of well, I won't name the company, but because of a certain very famous Australian air company.
Well,
You can name it on this show. We call them out.
To be honest, Father, air travel is a mess everywhere right now.
is.
So I can't really say it's one company or another. I think they all kind of suck right now.
Well, when I was flying to see you on Delta, they were offering crazy amounts of money because they'd completely overbooked the flights.
Yeah, well,
they're overbooked and
they always do that
understaffed.
too.
They're overbooked, understaffed, and nobody knows what they're doing. It's a complete mess. It's you go to. I understand in Las Vegas right now, you can make reservations, and it never used to be like this. You can make reservations, go to a fine restaurant. You'll be waiting, even with reservations, 30 or 40 minutes to get to your table, and then once you're at your table, you're waiting another 30, 40 minutes before the server even gets there because they're so understaffed. So I'm just grateful that the people that are working are showing up to work. I've increased my tips from my usual 20%
I have too.
to 25
Yeah.
or even 30% in some situations, just because I want to reward people who are actually willing to come to work. I appreciate those of you who are willing to work.
One of the shadow things about Australia is there's no tipping culture.
Yeah,
So,
you don't have that. Yeah, that's true.
It doesn't encourage great service.
That's the other side of the coin. That's the other side
Exactly.
of the coin. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think in those cases, all you have to do is just congratulate. Thanks for coming to work today.
I agree. That's right. Yeah.
Well, we've got a great show, as I already.
back.
Yes, we've got a great show, as we already said. Michael and Marti Parry, and we never know what's going to happen. We don't plan these shows. We don't script these shows. They're really basically off the cuff, and we just sort of go where it goes. But to get started here tonight, I know that Father Chris and Jamie Wolf will be looking at the chat to see if there's any questions coming in. On the second and third segments, we'll be putting up the phone number so that those who want to call in tonight can call in. And if you want to have a question or anything, we'll see where it goes. Comments, anything that's on your mind that you want to ask the Parrys, just by all means, we'd rather you call in. But if you prefer going into the chat on YouTube, that's fine too. I know our moderators are also looking at Facebook and Twitter. If there are questions that come in there, they'll usually forward them over to the chat room on YouTube for Father Chris and Jamie Wolf to bring to our attention, and we can kind of go over it. But in the first segment, I kind of like to just sort of see where things are going. So, honestly, I was thinking about you guys tonight, and I was listening to some old Art Bells. I'm a Coast to Coast AM subscriber, so I can listen to the old archives. And I like listening to the classic shows with Art Bell back in the 90s. That's when I, really became really enthralled with his show when I was in college and just loving it. And he had a medium on, and it was very interesting. He was talking about various things, and the things that he was talking about brought me to sort of an understanding or realization that the work that you guys do really has so much more to offer than just simply communicating with the dead, or maybe resting loved ones' minds that their loved ones still exist somewhere out there in the ether. There's so much more to it, in the sense that from a metaphysical and even a physical standpoint, when we're talking about just basic scientific physics and then also metaphysics, that it gives us an insight into the nature of reality. So there's a remarkable metaphysical component to the work that you do. So I think I'd like to get started off tonight, if you don't mind, kind of talking a little bit about that. So in the work that you've done, the connections you've made, I don't know if you refer to it as channeling, but when you communicate with these various personalities that have passed on, what has it taught you about the nature of reality? What have these entities revealed to you about the nature of our lives, about life after death, and kind of what it's like? Because I'm sure one of the greatest questions on everybody's mind, particularly somebody who is maybe facing their own mortality, is, what am I going to experience? Okay, we kind of know that dying is going to suck, for most of us.
It did.
And it does. Yeah. And death,
Not recommended.
Death isn't too bad, because then that's when it's kind of over.
When it's permanent, yeah.
It's when it's permanent. What happens after that? So in the best of your understanding, Michael and Marty, what have you learned from your communications with these various entities? What have they taught you about that process? What can we hope to experience, or what will it be like for the majority of us? Or is it going to be different for every person? How do you, I guess, interpret that?
Oh, that's a big question.
It is.
Okay.
No pressure, Michael. No pressure.
Yeah.
Well, when I first got into all this, I was just a teenager, and I wasn't doing any real communication at the time. I mean, I became sensitive in my early teens, late teens, early 20s. And, I read a lot, and I had experiences, as you could call them, spiritual, psychic experiences, spiritual experiences. And I sort of came to accept that there was an afterlife. And I saw mediums myself. Had my best friend came through a medium and spoke to me. He had just died. The medium had no idea who he was. I had lots of experiences with people that were really psychic and other mediums. And but my focus at the time wasn't really on this. It was more to do with work for the benefit of mankind. So I was working with people that were doing everything they could for the sake of mankind.
Right.
And when this medium told me that later in life I'd become extremely psychic and would do psychic healing, I misunderstood him. So when I got into this, then it wasn't something new to me, is what I'm trying to say. It wasn't like a great revelation or anything like that. It was more, I already understood most of it. So when you're asking me this, it's like there's not a lot they tell me that I didn't already know.
No, going into it. I got you. Okay.
I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, what have they? The fact that they've never let us down in all these years, that they're always there for us when we do this. It's and the way they do things is impressive. Like we just did a group this weekend, and there were about 60 people. Marty usually does about 4 portraits in the group. 2 of the portraits couldn't be recognized by anyone. One lady and her daughter thought it might be their grandfather, who was Native American. It was his nose, they said. I said, no, I don't think so. I think this man's English. Might be similar features, I suppose.
We both thought he was English.
We both thought he was an English guy.
Right.
So anyway, we wrapped up. Now, when we'd gone down to San Diego to the group, we were going to stay at an Airbnb, and at the last moment it got cancelled. So we were put up in a different Airbnb. The couple there were really cool. And after the group, we went back to their place and we sat around, and I was still tuned in. So we were sitting around the table, and there was a man called Bob there who wanted to say hello to the lady. And I said, this guy, he shot himself, he committed suicide. Oof. Well, she had a friend years and years ago called Bob who committed suicide by shooting himself. And it turned out that one of the unclaimed pictures was Bob.
Ah, okay.
So these are the things that always I think, wow, this is just, you're just not in control of this. They're planning it all out. You're supposed to go to this house and meet this couple, and Bob's going to show up there, and you're going to draw his picture for her. And, and the lady's dealing with health issues right now. And she told us that she was expecting so many other people that had just died to show up, and Bob wasn't even on her mind. So I said to her, well, that's interesting, isn't it? certainly not mind reading then. I didn't read your mind because it wasn't on your mind.
Right.
Right?
It's not always what you want, it's what you need.
It's what you need. And the thing was, she told us that many years ago, she had this very profound experience with Bob. And
after he
had crossed over, she had this very vivid dream. And in the dream, Bob, how do I do this with you, Bob? And he said, it's very easy. You just go through a door. You just step through a door and there I'll be, he said. And this was a very profound experience she had with him. And I said to her, well, this makes perfect sense to me, that Bob would be the one to come and talk to you because he gave you that profound experience. And here you are struggling with these things and he showed up again to say hello to you. To me, it makes perfect sense, I said to her, rather than one of your recently crossed relatives. Right. Well, there was an uncle there that showed up as well, but mostly it was Bob, you see. So I always find that stuff just so, cool. It's just like, it's perfect, really. And I think it's the perfection of it, the affirmation of all that. Like, okay, if you said to me, if somebody said to me, are they always around us? Are they always with us? I would say no. I would say they come and visit you.
Yeah.
And in one of the readings I did years ago, a lady wrote one of these questions down on her notepad. I didn't know what the questions were. So the third question I responded to her was, they'd like to say yes, but they have to say no. And I said, what was that question? And she said, well, are they always with us? And so without me knowing the question, they said the same thing I probably would have said myself. So there's the affirmation of all the things that I know over the years that have gone on. So it just kind of cements how I perceive it. The movie, Avatar.
Yes.
Avatar.
Yes.
You've seen it, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I need to see it again because it's been a long time and the new ones are coming out, so I need to refresh my memory.
Yeah, we need to reconnect, right?
Right.
Well, in the movie, he goes from the bed right next to the Avatar through this light tunnel into the Avatar's body. Yes. And when I watched that, I was amazed at how accurate that was. That's exactly what you go through. So that also cements something that was told to me, that the other side is right here, but at the same time far away. So it is, you have to travel to get there, and yet it's right here.
The paradox of nature. Yes.
Yeah, it's very interesting, because there they are standing around us. I can see them and everything, and other people do, obviously, too. And yet you have to travel, because I was going light speed through this tunnel to see my grandmother. And this was before the movie. So when I saw the movie, I realized, wow, somebody has got that down. They've had that experience and they know that's what it's like. And I thought that's the best representation of it I've ever seen. So that was another thing.
Well, let me hold that thought, because I'd like to get back to this, but I want to also kind of reflect back on something you said, because it's another question that comes up a lot. And that is, are they always there watching us? And I know that, one person said that because you never know if the ghosts are around. This person said, I'm never going to take another shower again.
Right. I'm not going to the bathroom anymore.
That's right. And it's like, I'm not a particularly modest person, so it doesn't affect me at all. But I mean, as far as like certain people, I would imagine that would bother them. So are there boundaries? And if so, how are those boundaries decided?
Well, it really has to do with the perspective of the people over you, that they view the physical plane differently after they've left it.
Okay.
Some of them have said it's like looking at a world of shadows, because when you're on the other side, you are in the projection room and you're watching the movie being projected.
I see.
And the earth seems like the image on the screen. So when you're coming around the relatives, you're fully aware that this person in the physical body is not really real. It's just light it's a light display.
So they have a whole different conception of the human body.
Right, they're not seeing it the way we see it.
Yeah, they're not seeing it the way we see it normally. Now, we can see it that way when we're here, and that's what I do when I'm doing this. I'm looking at it that way, and I'm looking at it from their perspective, so that's how I can see them. But their perspective is different on us. They love us, and it's more of a soul thing, so they're more tuned into our soul. The personality is a changing thing. The character and the soul is more the real thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
And they're aware of the aura, and they can see the light in the aura from thoughts, so they know what people think. They know, and they don't intrude because they have
Don't worry about it.
Oh, we're good.
We better take the camera out. It's one of them relatives trying to get
in. Trying to get in.
Hey, this is Bob.
See, there are no boundaries, right, Michael?
Yeah, no, they like I say, most of the time they don't really they just don't view things that way, unless it's an earthbound person, somebody that's stuck, that hasn't moved on. Well, that's a different matter. Right. I wouldn't say there's a lot of them, really. And if some people are stuck, it's usually for very short times. You know, it's maybe a day or two or a couple of weeks, maybe, that's it. It's very unusual for somebody to be stuck for a very long time. There has to be some sort of big reasons for that, you know, karmic reasons. So you're not generally going to have people hanging around you, you know, watching you in the bathroom,
well, it's funny
the toilet, you know.
That you should say in the shower, though, because the water is a really good conduit for psychic energy.
Point. Sure.
And I do a lot of conversations in the shower. It's so much easier to talk to them in there.
Interesting.
Well, I have found, I don't know if you find this to be true, but I have found that clothing is actually an inhibitor to a lot of spiritual realization. I find that it sort of stifles and restricts our sensitivity to the spiritual world. So I would imagine that, you know, being in the shower, you know, taking a bath, not having those constrictions, you're going to be more open, and it's going to be a little bit easier for these things to get through. But I think it is probably comforting to those people who worry about this kind of thing, that they're not seeing it or experiencing it the way that we do through our, you know, human construct.
Well, you know, I mean, the naked medium would be great for a kind of Ken and Barbie looking couple, but not us, unfortunately.
I don't know, Michael. Ken's not very richly endowed last time I checked, so I mean, it might not be all that good.
Although silk clothing is actually a good conductor of psychic energy, and that's why a lot of priests wear silk.
Yes,
don't they?
Yes, they do. They do. Yeah. I think my stoles are
this
silk.
cassock silk. Most Eastern cassocks are silk.
Yeah.
Or a lot are anyway.
Yeah. So silk is a spiritual conductor. It's a conductive, and then a lot of gold thread is often inside, woven into the outfits.
Yeah.
Threads, yeah.
Better word.
Yeah.
My teacher was an archbishop, and he explained to us its purpose and the purpose of the mitre, and how it was actually basically a suit that you put on to conduct energy. And he explained all
antenna.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
It is.
It's also to remove the ego. It's to remove the self. I mean, otherwise, you see this in other expressions of the church. You know, they turn out in Versace suits. You know, it's kind of when you just wear what the church wears.
Yes. Oh, how humble!
Removes you. Yeah, removes you from the thing. So.
Well, that is. I mean, the vestments are to create otherworldliness. I mean, the entire experience of the Mass is to create an environment that is spiritual and otherworldly. If we just went in there with clothing like this. In fact, that's the reason why I wear this. Some people are like, why aren't you dressed like a priest when you're doing this show? Well, because I don't want to, I want to be very worldly when I'm doing this show. I want to relate to my audience. I don't want to I don't want to create that barrier. This isn't a religious show, although we talk about religious topics. It's not a religious show. So I tend to, I dress down, which is kind of the inversion of the same reason. When we're putting on vestments, we're creating an otherworldliness to it, and we're stepping out of ourselves and becoming, trully operating in persona Christi, which is the entire point.
Exactly. You're making a very powerful magic.
Yeah, it's magic. It is.
It's magic. That's how my teacher explained it. It's magic, and you're empowering yourself even more by using the vestiges and, knowing exactly what it does and, the whole thing.
Everything from the incense, which is a way
part of the ritual.
To smell the prayer. It's using all 5 of your senses to pray. We're used to the words, right? Everyone knows how to pray with the words.
Right.
But not everyone realizes that you can pray with your nose. You can pray with your ears. The chanting is praying with your ears. The nose is, you're praying with the incense. Your eyes is the stained glass and the way that it creates an otherworldly light in the sanctuary. That's the reason they're stained glass. It's not to be ostentatious and look at how much money this church has. It's about to create an environment that feels different than the mundane, and that's all it's there to do. So I get it.
I was just looking at some. I went to Chartres Cathedral once in France. And it's a very interesting cathedral. It's got 2 spires at one end, and one has the moon on top and the sun on the other.
Uh-huh.
And at the far end, over the main altar there's an angel doing the blessing mudra down over the church. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, what a cool church this is. Well, inside, there's this mosaic on the floor that is to do with hertz. I'd have to show you a picture. I can't remember. I'd have to find it. But this frequency, when it's created, produces the exact same image that's on the floor of the church, which I thought, wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So they knew a lot more than we realized back then when they built these things.
Absolutely. Sure. There's an entire esoteric level to the architecture and the reason why these things were done. A lot of it's been lost. The monks
they actually cared more about architecture.
They did.
I don't know how architects earn any money anymore. They just design boxes.
Right, especially in the West and America. We have no appreciation for architecture anymore.
No, you build something today, in 20 years, if you don't take care of it, it's going to collapse.
It crumbles.
It will not last. Whereas in Europe, you have these structures that will endure for generations. And I think that's, I think it shows it's a reflection of our spirituality today too. We cared back then. We don't care enough today. And that apathy has I guess you could say, transmuted into all of our lives in every aspect, every facet of our life. Now it's all utilitarian. Even our spirituality has to be convenient. Otherwise, why practice it? Why do it? Why go through the effort and it doesn't matter what you're talking about. We can talk about religion, or we can talk about just developing spirituality in a more generic sense. It takes effort regardless, and a lot of people, if it's not easy, they don't want to do it. It's just better to just
we've become comfortable with passive entertainment.
Yes.
I mean, even I heard a reflection on, that putting pews in churches was really the end of it, because
that's true.
And I would say that because I have Eastern tendencies, as you know, but when you sit down, it's just like being at a theater. The whole point of it is supposed to be hard work, and that's what doesn't appeal to people anymore. So this whole critique of the contemporary church saying, "Oh, what can it do to get more people in?" I said, no. What can people do to improve their character and ability to do difficult things? That's the question.
It's true. And I mean, I don't care if you're Catholic or Buddhist or Hindu, you're going to find that same requirement there. The level of dedication is necessary. It's an effort that must be invested. And it is an investment. The best word for it is actually an investment, because it really is. With investment comes risk. With investment comes sacrifice, because obviously if you look at a traditional investment, if you put money into something, that's let's say you put $1 million into an investment, that's $1 million now that you can't use for something else. So there's a sacrificial aspect to it, with the idea that maybe if you're smart about it, it could develop into something greater than what it is now. Spirituality is just like that. But people just want it handed to them. And if it can't be handed, if it can't be convenient, if it can't be free, they don't want to do it. And I find it in all facets. I even find it in the more casual aspects of spirituality. Even when the people are like, oh, I don't need church. I'm spiritual, not religious. It's like, well, okay, let's talk about that. What are you doing with your spiritual but not religious life? And when you really break it down, they're not doing much.
And how is it benefiting other people?
Well, yeah, well, that's another question, right? So, I mean, I know Michael and Marty, I mean, there's effort to what you do, and there's sacrifice to what you do. I can see it, and just sometimes reading your posts or some of the struggles that you go through in order to make yourselves available. Even if it's simple things like a venue closing, and how COVID has wreaked havoc on your state, and places that you used to be able to depend on are not available anymore.
I think the government wreaked more havoc on their state.
Well, they did, but.
Yeah. That one that we just did, it was over 2.5 years ago since we were there last.
My goodness, that's
so
incredible.
we could have done another half a dozen or more events there.
Yeah, and those are all people that didn't get answers
right.
they could have had.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there was, it. One
Every
lady.
time we go there, it's over half of it is new people. So
Yeah. It is effort. You have to put effort into it. Sometimes you don't feel like it. You have to force yourself into getting to a place because you're there to help people, and that's it. You're going to do it, and that's it. Doesn't matter whether you're about to fall over. You're going to do it.
Because you can't really do it when you're in a bad mood, too.
That's true.
Well, yeah. I reflect on it, before Mass especially if it's Sunday evening, there's always an attack that says, I can't be bothered.
I've experienced it.
I experience quite often. I mean, plenty of times where I'm looking at the phone going, no, not today.
Yeah. It's definitely a demonic attack.
Run.
In the banal sense, but that's right. Anything worthwhile, there's always that thing that says, don't bother, or you're too tired, or give yourself a break. Character says no. This is important, and it's got to be done.
That's right.
Well, I would imagine the work that you both do is draining after you've done a session for if you do like an event.
Yeah, you're right.
Especially a group.
I mean, I'm still a bit exhausted from Saturday night.
I bet.
And we did sort of
as we
stay up late with a couple, and
as we get a bit older, it gets even harder.
Right.
Yeah, there's a physical component to it.
A little more.
Yeah, I know how tired we get doing resolutions. I can't imagine what they go through.
Oh, I mean, resolutions are I always joke about it, but it's really not a joke. But I mean, when Jamie and I go on a case, and it usually ends or concludes somewhere in the very late hours, 1, 2 in the morning. Sometimes the only way to really recover from it is to just go and get real greasy tacos or something and just sit and decompress with this junk food, and you get a little energy burst from it. The fat is really very good for getting your energy level back up. There's something about it. And then you crash. And then, I mean, I'm telling you, when we do like a Ghost Adventures or something like that, I mean, we are just like zombies the next day, zombies getting on the plane, zombies sitting on the plane, that barely can form a coherent sentence. It's that draining, and it's because it's the same kind of spiritual work. You're making a connection with something that is, I think, energetically dissimilar from ourselves. And that is draining. Now, the Mass, on the other hand, when I say Mass, I find that invigorating. I don't find the Mass to be draining. I mean, it's even like the Easter Vigil, which is one of the longest ones, if not the longest one. At the end of that, I can barely get to sleep because I get so much energy from it. But that's an anomaly.
That's the trade-off. Tired before, energized after.
That's true. That's true. You experience it, don't you, Father? It's
sorry,
true.
I interrupted you, Marty. Sorry.
Yeah, I think in what we're doing is we're just there's just so much energy going through for the people that we're doing it for, and I tell people this. You probably don't realize this, I say to them, but I'm not thinking any thoughts of my own really for the whole couple of hours that I'm doing this.
Well, that's easy for you.
Oh, she's
nothing good.
Oh, it's a good boy.
Oh, it's a good boy.
It's a good boy.
Did have a funny moment. One of the ladies in spirit, sort of at one point, she said to me, "Say Jim." All right. She's saying Jim. Then nobody said anything. So she grabbed my arm and she walked me over to the far end of the room. I'd never had anyone do that to me before. So she literally grabbed my arm. I said, "Oh, well, here we go."
The person in spirit.
The spirit person.
Okay.
Walked me over to the far side of the room, stood me, and there was a couple there, and the lady says to me, "That's Jim." Her husband. And it was his mother. It was pretty funny. So there are just some very funny moments,
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Back to the question about metaphysical revelations and the nature of reality and things that might have been revealed through the work, whether it be something you asked and received an answer from, or whether just something by the virtue of interaction you were able to infer or even just discern what something is. Have you ever encountered an explanation for what people? And let me preface this before I say this.
Far away.
Well, yeah. I want to preface it because there's some personal motivation here. I'm very good at meditation, and there's very little that I have ever not been able to understand if I commit myself to meditating on it. But the one thing that I've always struggled to break the barrier on is alien and UFO phenomenon, particularly alien abduction. And the reason I got into being interested in this is that on occasion, a small number of cases that we get end up falling into that category. They think they're demonic because people have been taught by their churches that aliens are some kind of demonic conspiracy. So they think that if they have an alien type of event, it must be a demon tricking them or something. So they come to us. But the reality is, I have not found any evidence that the demons are pretending to be aliens from other planets with spaceships. I have not seen this. And when people have these problems where they are reporting a lifetime, even going back to childhood, being abducted by aliens, that they need much different help than the kind of help that I provide through this ministry. Exorcism's not going to help them with this. Even prayer, to a certain extent, doesn't seem to help them with this. It definitely seems to continue on regardless of anything we do with the rites of the church or anything. So I'm curious, have you encountered this? Have you talked to anything that could reveal what these things are? Are they really from other planets? Are these real spacecraft? Is it actual technology from another world? Or is there something else going on here? What is your impression on this based upon what you have been able to learn?
Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no.
Hang on, I'm writing that down.
Yeah, let me get a note on that.
You heard what Paul said.
Look out for St. Paul. He was a hard ass.
I think we have. Well, at least I have a little bit different theory of what most of the alien abductions are.
Okay.
For one thing, think about the abductions. Most of them are in their bed. They rise up and go up.
Yeah.
Gee, there's a ceiling there. So they're not going up there physically. They're going up there
astrally.
Astral projection.
Now, astral beings, on the astral plane, everything looks a little bit gray. The grays. And some of the astral beings are not that nice. So they're going to imitate what, sort of pretend that they're aliens so that you'll be afraid of aliens. So the whole world is afraid of aliens. So when aliens come to help us, perhaps, we're not going to listen to them. We're going to try and shoot them down.
Without question. Without question.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think similar thing. I think, think about it. You have the technology and the understanding of God to travel across a galaxy, and you're here plucking up cattle and
probing
them, and probing a bunch of dummies that are walking around here. What possible purpose could it serve you? No, I think this is something. It has a sinister tinge to it because I think it's all fear-based. So whoever is doing this, and you have to remember that there's a lot of mind control technology out there. Whatever people have found out that people in governments have, they're a lot further ahead than people realize everything.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff going on in the background that...
a lot of it just goes to trying to control the masses.
Yeah.
All I have to do is read some of the declassified documents.
Yeah.
The last 20 years.
The
shocking.
The higher intelligence aliens, the real ones, they all the ones that I've found out about are spiritual in nature. They don't mean harm to anyone. They obey God's laws, the law of karma.
They have a code that they can't really interfere with us.
Yeah, they don't interfere.
Because karmically they can't. Because if they were to come here and, take over, we would, praise them as if they're gods.
Yeah.
And that would take away our free will.
Well, a lot of people think that's what happened, with the gods of ancient Egypt, for example. Whether or not these higher developed creatures were what really built the pyramids versus
the Anunnaki.
Yeah. Well, there's that too.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing right there.
You got the ancient astronauts theory and all that stuff. What are your thoughts on that? Who built the pyramids?
Well, I don't think.
I didn't do it.
You didn't do it. I didn't do it. I know that.
I don't think it was Egyptians. Current. How can I put it? I think they go back. I think they go back tens of thousands of years. They talk about them being 10,000 years old. They could be way older than that. I know the last big Russian scientific things that they did at the pyramids back in the 70s. They dated them at 40,000 years old.
Wow.
The pyramids have been under seawater. There's seashells up on all over the pyramids.
Yeah.
There's sea incrustation and all kinds of stuff. And it kind of makes sense because the top bit is okay, and then it's all sort of looks like it's been worn away, really, all the way down, doesn't it?
Well, some of that I think is because they actually, to think it's kind of them. They built the city of Cairo by taking them apart. So a lot of those.
Yeah, they did it.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. So some of it might be explained by
refurbished pyramids.
They didn't care about them as much as we do today. So some of it might explain that. But what I find interesting though is you're right about the seashells and stuff. It would indicate that they might have gone through some cataclysms or at least different variations, which would imply that we're talking about.
Well, there's also
tens of thousands of years.
A very interesting thing about them is that the Nobel Prize-winning chemist in France got hold of some pieces of the pyramid and he analyzed it, and he said it's concrete.
Oh, really?
It has no strata. There's no identifying rock. He said it's concrete.
Oh,
it's
how
some form of concrete.
Yeah, I had heard that.
And that, when you think about it, it's perfect sense, because you have blocks that so tight fit, and then looks like a slurry line between them, and you can't even get a razor blade in there. Well, what do you do when you pour a block? You pour a block, you let it set, and then you pour another block, and of course they're going to be perfect fits, aren't they? Except you're going to have a slurry line.
Yeah.
And I think the same way about all these blocks that they built. Somehow they molded these blocks. All the blocks, the massive ones, with all the little carbuncles on them.
Yes.
At the bottom.
Yes.
Well, they have them on the pyramid. It's one side of the pyramid at the base. There is the exact same thing that you see in Peru. You see it in Turkey. You see it in Greece. You see it in Bulgaria. You see these blocks everywhere, all over the world. So there was a civilization that was molding blocks. They weren't carving them. They were somehow it's said that I read somewhere that in the rainforest, they had a method of basically dissolving the rock with certain plants, and they could dissolve the rock and it would become basically like a slurry. And then it would reform. So I think basically that what they did was they had some method where they either moltenized the rock in some way, or they liquefied it and poured it. And and these little stubs make perfect sense to me.
It's interesting because a similar technology apparently was used for the second Jewish temple, where it also has these massive blocks.
They're underneath.
Yes,
they're underneath. So
you can't put a razor blade in there.
That's because they were both built by Jews.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
That's bad. Done
right.
Definitely bad from now.
Hey, no one said they're not hard workers. I mean, clearly.
Well, you know what's interesting about that whole, the temple on the rock thing, right?
Yeah.
Is that to the south of that big area where the building,
yes,
the rectangle,
Zion.
Yeah, the rectangular structure where they all bang their heads and pray against, that big wall. That was the Roman.
You're talking about the Wailing Wall.
Yeah. Well, that was the Romans built their Roman fort on top of that.
Right.
And the site where Jesus was tried is where the temple is, right? Is where the dome is. I think I've got this right.
I think at that time the Jewish temple was still standing there. That he was trying.
No. The Jewish temple was never on there. The Jewish temple was south of that whole structure, because in the Bible it says that where they formed the temple was where the water sprang from. And the only place in that, for miles and miles and miles, where water springs up out of the ground, is just south of that temple. In fact, they found the original site, and it's maybe half a mile from south of that main fort, because that was the original fortress that housed 5,000 Roman legions on top of that structure. It was a fortress. It was a Roman fort built on top of those massive blocks that were pre-existing even before the Jews were there. So those again are some ancient structure that existed way back, you see.
Well, I mean, there's definitely, I think, a lot of there is contention on whether or not the Jewish temple was there. Yeah,
a lot of Jewish.
I think conventional archaeologists say it was there, but there are definitely other groups that have argued against that and saying that the temple was in a completely different location. Fascinating stuff. We're going to take our first break here, and we'll be back with your questions after this. Welcome back, everyone, to the second part of Vestiges After Dark. Tonight, we have Michael and Marti Parry with us, taking your questions, comments, and we'd love to hear from you. Call into the show. The number to call is 347-514-7150. That's 347-514-7150. You can enter PIN number 3768923. That's 3768923 to get into the queue. We're also taking international calls free on Skype. Just dial up Eye of the Seer, EYEOFTHESEER, and we'll take you on the air. For waiting through the break, everyone. I'm happy that you're still with us, and we have so much more for you tonight as we really dive into some of the great topics that are about to come. And They're coming from all of you. So we have a stash of questions. You can see here that Jamie is writing like a maniac.
Can't read my own writing.
All those, a lot too.
You got a lot too. Great. Well, we're going to start getting into them. I don't want to waste too much time with my questions. I think I'm very satisfied with how the first segment went, and I feel that's like my time to kind of ask the guest questions. Now it's your time. Now it's your chance to talk to our guests. And we actually, before we even get started with the chat room, we already have somebody on the line. So we're going to bring them on here right now, calling in from the 515 area code. Hello, you are on the air.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you just fine.
Oh, good. My name is Tom Collins.
Hi, Tom.
Winterset, Iowa.
He's from Iowa.
And,
it's my neck of the woods.
Yeah, it is.
Hey, Tom.
What's your question, Tom, or comment?
Okay, my question is this. When souls in the past 100 years up till now have come to the earth plane, and they chose to enter at this time, what has the COVID-19 and the vaccine, what has that done for the soul's learning and journey? In other words, is this a karmic thing that they knew was coming, or is this a surprise that came on and they're having a new karmic retribution? I'm just at a loss with this.
Well, I think that, that COVID-19, I don't think there's really anything that big that can actually just accidentally happen. I think there's always intention, whether it be nefarious or otherwise. Intention is intention behind it. So I think that that's definitely something that was part of the story of humanity for this period of time. I think that was meant to happen. I do think it was nefarious, but at the same time, I do also think it was intended. So, Michael and Marty, what are your thoughts? How has this affected the souls, the spirits of people that have lived and died through this crisis?
Well, I'll tell you, I've already spoke to at least half a dozen people that have died from the jibby jab.
Yeah.
So I think people are learning a hard lesson in discrimination. That's what I think.
I know of 2 people that died from that.
I know of 3 or 4.
They're learning a very hard lesson in discrimination. That's what they're learning. That they should discriminate more and think more before just accepting things.
Don't just follow like sheep.
And
well, it gets back to personal responsibility. Do your own research.
Yeah,
see what's right for you.
Yeah.
It's between you and your medical staff. You can't have a government authority.
I had a person call me. I get a lot of, probably because I'm very responsive to them, but I get a lot of people call me on the phone, random surveys, political surveys and whatnot. And there was one that called me regarding my views on vaccines. And so I thought that was an interesting one, and I definitely wanted to participate in it. And one of the questions that they had was, how did I feel about the vaccine based upon the information that was made available to the public regarding it? And I said, well, I think it was reprehensible because I was actually in the early days thinking, oh my God, they're working on a vaccine. Isn't that cool? Isn't that great? I mean, wouldn't that be fantastic if they can come out with a vaccine and resolve this whole thing and we don't have to worry about it? So I was very positive towards it until my doctors were saying, not so fast, be careful. And politicians and celebrities were saying, you can't get enough of this stuff. Keep going. Go for round 2, round 3, round 4. Just keep it. And I'm thinking when John Legend is telling me, giving me medical advice, that's a problem.
I wouldn't even take music advice from him.
So my thing was, regardless of how you feel about it, even if it was a completely benign, innocent thing, and even if it was a wonderful vaccine, which I think it's been proven now, regardless of what camp you were in back then, that it doesn't really work all that well. Regardless.
We didn't really have any idea about vaccines years ago. we just, we're like everybody else, a vaccine. You get a vaccine for that, and get a vaccine for this.
Yeah.
Until years ago, we did about a year's worth of sessions with this one woman that she wanted to find out what to do about her autistic son he was regressive autistic. And that meant he was born fine and everything until he got the MMR vaccine, and then he was just almost a vegetable.
So basically that changed our whole view
your views on it.
Now, what I wanted to say to Tom was, I look at it like this, Tom. When you think about the Holocaust and all those people who didn't really fight, they just kind of like lambs to the slaughter, basically.
Yep.
Oh, well, it can't be this bad. Oh, don't worry.
Oh, they're not really
going to do this. Oh, it'll be all right. It'll be better next week, and on it went. It got worse and worse and worse. That's how I look at this. And the people did exactly the same thing. They just didn't act. They just kept going along with everything and listening to people they shouldn't have listened to.
Well, you mentioned the word discriminate, and I think because I think that's a really important word.
Yeah.
Because there's been a war on that word, because we only associate discriminate with the negative side of discrimination.
Right. It's actually a good thing.
It's a good thing. Yeah.
It's discernment.
It's a good thing.
If you can discriminate a good wine, that's a good thing.
Right.
And so
it's a great point.
There's actually not enough discrimination going on in the positive sense.
Exactly. You're great point. That's exactly it. That was one of the things I learned from my teacher was to discriminate, and people don't know how to do it. They don't have the mental
critical thinking skill.
The critical thinking. They just don't do it.
It's not taught anymore, Michael. It's not taught.
It's not taught.
I think it's actually more fundamental than that. Because in order to apply critical thinking, you have to be able to comprehend different ways of thinking.
Yeah.
And we people, and I would say millennials downwards, have been told there's only one orthodoxy. Which of course has nothing to do with Christianity, but
that's right.
an orthodox way of thinking about everything, and if you and anybody that deviates from that way of thinking is Hitler.
Yeah,
and this has having a terrible effect on humanity, because of course if something that's not what the media are telling you is Hitler, then you could, if it's Hitler, you can kill Hitler, right? You can, and that's how you end up with a president in the name of unity calling people fascists because they don't agree with his policies. I mean, it's just ludicrous.
And at the same time, he just said that the pandemic's over, and they're all upset about that now.
Well, the thing about Tom is a undertaker.
Oh,
I see.
And so Tom's a really cool guy.